Good morning, everyone. My name is Jared, and this is my channel, Mazda B3K. In this episode, we are going to replace most of the cooling hoses or radiator hoses on my 2001 Ford F-250 named Ms.Mildew. Without further ado, let's get started. So, you guys have seen this particular 5.4 liter on the channel quite a bit. We're in it today because I noticed the last time that I was working on it that all of these hoses are feeling really, really soft. And if you've not done a lot of work with radiator hoses and whatnot, when these hoses get old, they don't necessarily blow out. Well, eventually they do, but they get really, really soft is what happens. And you'll get it to where you put it on and you'll put the factory spring clamp on there and it'll still leak because the hose has gotten so soft that it doesn't squeeze it enough to keep it from leaking. So in this case, I had to put a worm clamp up there to fix that problem. And I'm still leaking, I'm pretty sure, through that connection right there. Same problem. I had to take it off whenever I did the timing set job, and truck's had a slow leak ever since, and I decided it was time to fix that before I went to Texas. Go do stuff and things and stuff. Now, I'm not replacing all the hoses, just throwing that out there right now. This little dude, he's all right. He's not getting replaced. The heater core hoses seem to be okay. I'm not replacing those, and unfortunately, they're not just regular old hose that you can go pick up. They are formed lines that you do need. In case one of them goes kaplooey, I will be bringing what are they called? A nipple, a double-sided nipple, so that I can just loop, and some heater core hose, so I can just loop it together in case it blows out. I don't expect it will. This one's okay, the other one's okay. But what we will be replacing, and it's hard to see, but there's a line that comes out the bottom of the reservoir. That's going to get replaced. We're going to be replacing this upper radiator hose. And we're going to be replacing the big guy, which is, call it the lower radiator hose if you want. It's more like a hose assembly. Here, let me show you the replacement. So looking over here, this is what I mean, right? This is your lower rad hose on a 5.4. There's a little bit of variance depending on how it's packaged, but this is basically it. This runs out to your oil cooler. And then you've got this lower assembly. Then you have your upper. And of course you have, this is the cooling reservoir back to the, I can't remember if this is radiator or block, but it goes to one of the two. In my case, I went with all Dayco parts. Dayco and Gates both make pretty good kit. So this lower assembly is a Dayco 72027. It is I guess that's an EB1613. I think is our part. Maybe not, I'm not sure. And we have an EB1231 for that one there. I don't know if it's that number or that 407754. I honestly don't remember. But they're all Dayco. They are all available. So that's what we're doing. We will probably need to take some stuff off along the way, just so we can get access to places. And we are going to have to crawl around on our backs a little bit. With all the blabbering out of the way, first thing we got to do is drain coolant. For that, we need to locate the petcock, which is on the radiator. It is kind of driver's side-ish, kind of on this line, but at the bottom. Get my pan, get that in position. You can pop the petcock open with some pliers, so I'm gonna go grab pliers, we'll do that. All right, so I lied. This one actually is a socket setup. It's a 19 millimeter. So just get it started. Loosen it up a little more. There we go. Now in my case, I intend just to not reuse this coolant. I'm just considering this the second part of my coolant flush for this truck, so that I've got mostly fresh coolant in it. But if you wanted to save this, you would want to use a clean pan, you know, set it aside, keep it clean, and then you could just put it back in. But like I said, in my case, I'm just going to take this, bottle it, and eventually dispose of it in a responsible way. Anyway, this part's boring, so I'll bring you back when we've got everything drained. Alright, so got the coolant drained out. You should get something like 3 gallons and change out. If you just are draining the radiator, there's more to be had in the block. There is a block drain located on the driver's side near the oil filter. I tend to leave it alone because it's a hex head and it is quite stuck. I think they use red thread locker on it. So you really shouldn't try to remove it unless you're committed to having to drill it out and then replace it with something, which is on my to-do list. Replace it with, I think it's a 1/4 NPT thread, like a pipe thread. And just replace it with a plug or something with a square head that I can easily get a tool on versus what Ford did. Anyway, to get to the hose at the bottom of our reservoir, I'm going to go ahead and take the reservoir loose. And that's going to be 3 8mm. There is one here, there, and it is probably a little off camera, but there's a third one right here. So we're going to get that so that we can actually get to our hose at the reservoir end. 8mm. And of course, I'm going to try to drop it, knowing me. All right. So that's 2. Let me get this out of the way so I can get access. An 8. Cool, that's an 8. All right, so at this point, this is loose. And now you can see why we, see if I can zoom in. There we go. See why we needed it loose. We need that loose so that we can get some pliers in here, get access to this clamp that you may or may not be able to see over my shoulder. All right, this is what we look like, getting that out of the way. As you can see, the other end goes down, as you can see, there we go, goes down into the radiator. So we'll need to go down there, get that loose. We need to go down there anyway to get our lower radiator hose out. There's a clamp we got to let loose down there anyway. So, yay. I found these. I have no clue what they are or what they're actually for, but it worked out really well to get this clamp off. So this is my new favorite tool for the day. All right, let's go down below, get the other end of this hose, go ahead and get it out of the way. All right, this is the other end of that line. You see we have another spring clamp there. We're going to take that off, wiggle it off, expect it to pee out a little bit of coolant, so have your bucket ready. See, bucket, yay. And then while you're down here, you might as well go ahead and take that one off because that's for your lower. And then if you look over here, that is the clamp I was referring to. So that's got to come out, come off. You just take a trim tool, pop it apart. And with that, we'll be done with pulling connections, at least on the bottom here. But you can also see there's those 2 tubes that come off the lower that go back to where the cooler is. And that's going to be kind of around, you should be able to see it. Yeah, so there's the oil filter right there. It's going to come in around where the oil filter is. I will, of course, show you more on that later. We'll get these done first. See, just a wee bit of coolant. Only got a little bit in my hair, so we are moving up in life. It did not get on my eyes or my face, so we are improving. But there's that one, and then I'll go ahead and grab that other one when this one's done peeing. All right, so to separate this clamp, take a trim tool, sometimes called a cat's claw. get it up in there, just wiggle it back and forth, and it'll pop this loose. And when you do that, you can then really pull this hose down, try to get all the coolant out of it. This is going to drip, so just leave your pan here for a while. And with that, we're done with what we need to do down here in the front of the engine. Now we need to go back topside and disconnect some stuff. Okay, so now let's go ahead and pull the upper rad hose. Should be nice and easy. Should not be any coolant in it at all. So like I said, I don't know if this is the right tool for these spring clamps, but man, oh man, is this thing, it works really well. Actually kind of grab onto it and wiggle it, because I always thought that the correct tool was this guy. See, it's set up so one side is meant to go, it's got the slot on it. I'll show you guys this real quick. So you get your slot, right? Sorry, camera. Got your slot in your cup like that, and then you should be able to squeeze it, and then it actually kind of ratchets so it'll hold it shut. So this is the correct tool, but because it's got those spinning ends on it, it's really fiddly. And when you've got plenty of space like this, it works great, but when you're in tight space, not so much. Anyway, so we're off at this end. As you can see, no coolant, we took care of that. This side, I put that clamp there, that's going to be an 8mm. We'll just get that out of the way real quick. Then this comes off, and we'll just keep going. By the way, it's a little difficult to see in there, but very top right there is your thermostat. Right in there. So if you feel like you need to change out your thermostat, as you can see, this went a while before the coolant was changed out. It's not terrible. It's not rust. It's not pitted, but it went a bit. If you feel like your thermostat needs to be changed out, now is a great time to do it. Just have a bolt here and a bolt there. It comes out. You probably have to do a new gasket right here, but that's it. And then you're good, right? As I mentioned already, we are not doing anything with those hoses. I've already converted them away from their quick releases, so they're just worm clamps, which makes them a lot easier to work on. But if you've not touched these before, there's a special tool you need to disconnect the hose at the firewall, unless you do like me and you just get a cutoff wheel and you say, forget this mess, and you get it. You just cut it away and convert it. Supposedly it works great if you have the tool. I have never had success with that, but we're not messing with those. So the next thing that we need to take a look at is this connection here. It's going to be kind of tricky to get in there. So what I'm probably going to do to give myself a little more elbow room is we're going to go ahead and we'll do the usual thing, and we will take the intake off. It just pops in on this side if you've never done it. And then strictly speaking, if you want, you can just loosen up this clamp, kind of wiggle this off, take this out. What I generally like to do is just take the whole thing out. I loosen it up here, loosen that clamp real quick, just pop these off, take that off, and just take the whole arm out of the way. You'll have to make sure that you catch your MAF sensor, which, oh, here it is right here. This should be the MAF, I believe. So you can get it out, no issue. But it frees up just a bunch of real estate in this area. It's not hard to take off, and gives you more room to get at this guy who's a real booger, particularly if you are left-handed like me. So we're going to see how this is going to work. See, lots more real estate, right? So now we actually have access to come at this clamp from the side, on the other side of this big connector block. This is where your transmission connectors come in for your ECU, stuff like that. So we really don't want to mess with this unless we absolutely have to. If we need to, I think I already kind of busted this when I did the timing job, but you can slide this off the metal bracket and kind of try to shove it out of the way. Or alternatively, you take those two studs off and then the bracket comes loose and then you just kind of pull it out of the way. Either or, we may need to get that, maybe not, we will see. Our target is here. I'm going to try to come in with my new favorite pliers and slide that back, and then we need to pop this off. All right, having that access from removing the air intake did the trick. I was able to get in there, wiggle it off. So there we go. Didn't have to fool with this at all. That makes me happy. All right, so at this point, we are down to our two connectors that should be coming in around the oil filter. So let's go take a look at it. All right, so here we are. Here's our oil filter, right? And then this actually feeds the oil cooler, right? Not all 5.4s have oil coolers, but some of them do. And as this truck is set up with the tow package, it absolutely does. So I know the light's not being great here, but see if I can change the angle. Come on, flashlight. There we go. So something like that. We got a pair of spring clamps we're going to have to take loose. Just going to have to get at it the best way you can. If you absolutely have to, if you need the clearance, you know, you can drop your oil filter. Of course, you'll need to catch your oil because it's going to pee out oil. You know, if you feel like now's the time for an oil change, hey, maybe you should do an oil change. But yeah, they really wedged this in there. It's not as bad on my van that has an oil cooler. It comes in a different way. That is entirely not fun. All right. Have to figure out how to sneak a tool in there, and then we're going to have to rotate those clamps around, back them off, and then may need to use a pick to loosen up those hoses. And it's probably going to pee as well, so you probably want to go grab your pan, bring it down this way, so that we can get that. And hopefully I didn't see any clamps that actually hold the hoses in position. On my van, there's actually a clamp that was holding the hoses where they were about right there onto the firewall, and it was super annoying. But a little bit different. It's a 97 versus an 01. All right, that was entirely not fun, but the hoses are off. This one, not so bad. You've got enough room. You can get some circlip pliers, as I learned, or 90-degree pliers in there and kind of wiggle things off. But this guy, ooh, I had to use a combination of like 4 or 5 different pliers to wiggle here, wiggle there, use a flat-bladed screwdriver to just push the clip when I could and add it all together. I finally got it past the end of the nipple. Yeah. See, I've got all sorts of pliers down here that I had to use. These hose pliers came in clutch. They helped me get things wiggling. But it's out. And so what I'm going to do when I go to reinstall this is I'm not putting the spring clamps back on. I am going to put worm clamps on. And I'll have them to where the screw heads are going to be kind of pointing like that, pointing straight down, so that you can access and loosen the worm clamps from under the truck without it being a 1-hour battle to get a single hose off. So laying down our parts for a stare and compare, our lower hose looks pretty good. I don't have any arguments there. Our reservoir to radiator looks pretty good. But if we look at our upper hose, you can see, while the bend looks okay, I suspect it might be too long. But that'll be a relatively easy fix if that's what it turns out to be. You just chop the hose down to size. Not a big deal. Particularly since that's the upper hose up top, nice and easy access, no worries at all. So considering how horrible and terrible it was, we're going to have so much fun. We're going to put this back in first. So that's our hardest one. Everything else is pretty much cakewalk compared to this. So it actually doesn't matter which one of these is top or bottom. So you're just gonna stick it on there however it lays the best. I notice this one's a bit longer, about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches. So we may wind up trimming that if that's what we need to do. But we're gonna go ahead and thread this booger bear back in. Take care of that. These were the clamps I was able to scrounge up. They're a little bit bigger than what I want. They'll work. They're just going to have a lot of extra clamp sticking through, and that can sometimes cause problems. That's what I got, and they're 8mm. So as long as you angle them right, you can come at them from the bottom with a tool, and the 1.5 hours I just spent getting these lines loose, you don't have to do that again. It'll take you, 5 minutes, which is kind of nice. All right, let's get back to this. So getting some stuff fitted up. As you can see, I got that seated all the way. Taking an eyeball on stuff, making sure that the hoses aren't going to contact anything that might wear a hole. Like if this was sitting on the, what is that? That's the steering box right there. And it's not. I've got the other side connected. I don't have them hooked up yet, but I've got the lines run for the cooler. Let me show you something from down below here. When you run this back in, the only way these lines are gonna go is you have to run them basically under the oil pan. That's how they're meant to run. Just in this neighborhood. They have to go there. And you'll kind of know you have it right because this clamp should be able to sit comfortably in between that plastic bit right there. And then here's our lower right here. That's back in. I need to put the, the clamps on and everything, but go take care of down at the cooler side. If you are going to put on this brand new rubber, and it just will not go because it's new and it's not stretched out and soft. Drop your can of stuff, but very important things here. Use a little silicone spray. You can spray down the inside of the hose, spray down the the metal nipple you're going to, and it'll slip right on there, slicker and snot. Say that 3 times fast. Works really well. It also works if you've got a hose that's stuck and you're trying to get it back off. You can kind of make a little hole, creep a little silicone in there, and then try to twist it back and forth. It can help you get a hose off too. All right, so not the greatest picture, I know, but as you can see, we've replaced both with worm clamps, and now with the heads pointing at an angle that is accessible with a couple of extensions, wobble, stuff like that. So this is the hardest part. It is now done. Now we move back to the engine bay and we take care of getting our spring clamps in on all the rest of our connections. All right, so this upper is too long. You see that pinch there? That's no good. That's bad, because potentially what could happen during operation is this hose could collapse, the cooling system can't circulate anymore, and then you wind up with an overheat condition. So what we're gonna do is probably cut off about right there, and you wanna try to make this cut as clean as possible, but as long as you're not cutting too severely, like back here or something, your cut can be a little ugly and you'll still have plenty of hose over the nipple so you can make a good clean clamp. Looking at the shape of our hoses, it looks like we may need to trim on either end. I'm trying to maintain the bends, the formed parts, because that's the most important part about this. Otherwise, we just go buy some hose from the auto parts store. So I'm gonna use a utility knife and I'm gonna make a mark right there. And then I'll come in with scissors, finish it out. And then before I trim any more, I'm gonna put the hose on, see how it looks. If it's fine, it's fine. If I gotta trim a little more, I'll trim a little more. But this is definitely an application where less is more, because you cut too much, well, now you need a new hose. So here's what came off. Gonna save that, because that's a perfectly good chunk of hose if I ever need to splice something down the line. We have that. I did not take anything off the end. Here's how we look. And that's going all the way down to the stop. And I don't see a kink that I'm worried about. So this is good. I'm not going to trim it any further. We'll let it operate for a while, see how that goes. But I think we're good. I'll go ahead and put the clamps back on and wrap this up. All right, so for this guy, length and everything look pretty good. I went ahead and you can see I've got this. This is the angle I chose for the getting the spring clamp back on. That worked out pretty well, because then you slide it back in position, which is like that, and we're good to go. I will say this one's like a hair shorter than the one that came out, so you don't get a ton of wiggle room once you have it clamped in. So make sure that when you run the hose, I'll show you from the bottom, you got to run it in front of a couple of things. So you got to run it, let's bring the camera around here, please ignore fingers, but you have to run it in front of your transmission line cooler stuff. If you try to run it around the back side of this, you won't have enough hose. I mean, what I may do as an experiment, since I got the tough side in place, I might disconnect this bottom and then run it the other way and see what we get. But I think that's what I want to do. At the same time, I don't see wear marks on this loom, which would make me think that it was coming out back here. So let me tinker real quick and I'll let you guys know. All right, if you've been following me step by step, here's where you should be. You should put those two 8mm back in and put that 8mm back in. You should put your lug wrench, if you got it, put that back. I did test the other way to route the hose. Did not work out well at all. So what I told you was good. You need to get it in front of some of your transmission cooler lines and run it through. You should put your air intake back in. That part just pops in. Then you need an 8mm there, and in my case I need an 8mm there, and then that will just pop on. Don't forget to reconnect your MAF IAT sensor right here. And at this point, the job should be done. We should have replaced our upper and lower radiator hoses and our lower coolant tank hose. And I left this guy because, again, he's in pretty good shape. I'm not too worried about him. The heater core lines seem to be in decent shape, and they're just kind of a nightmare to get to. You have to take your evap purge thing out of the way. So you take that off basically, and then you have access. You take it off, but it's two formed lines. One goes back to a connection way in the back there, and then one comes up here. Not super fun to do, but doable. Anyway, that should be it except for the fill. So we'll go ahead and start the fill. One thing to keep in mind as you begin to fill, put a bottle in, stop, go below. Make sure you have nothing dripping from an egregious, you didn't get a hose on right. Because first you got to make sure it's good under no pressure, and then you're going to have to run it and let it get up to the full 16 pounds pressure and make sure it doesn't leak thin. All right, so you're going to go through the better part of 3 gallons to get yourself pretty close to the minimum line, and you're going to keep seeing it drop. What that is air displacing itself through the cooling system as water or coolant shoving its way in. And even after you do all this and you let it sit and burp for a while, there's still going to be big air pockets that cannot get out unless you run it. So I'm going to stop for lunch, but when I get back, we'll top this off one more time. And then we're going to run it. We're going to let it idle. We're going to let it come up to temp, let the thermostat open, let it circulate, and you're going to see this go. Don't be alarmed. That's just it burping out the vast majority of that air that's left. And don't be surprised as after you drive a day or two and you come out and look, you'll see that the level's going to be a little bit below. Same deal. You're still working out air pockets that are in the system because there is no bleeder in the system. The bleeder is the overflow tank. That's how it works. It's not like my wife's car that's got like a little bleeder screw and you open it and it until you're good. So anyway, I'm going to come back after some lunch. We're going to wrap this up. I thought of a better way to do this, a way that is safer, because I wound up with a big air pocket that freaked out the temp sensor. So here's a way to do it where you're not worrying about that. Here's what you do. This is your engine coolant temperature sensor right here. Take the electrical off, take it out. Okay. Now you need to do this with the engine cold and not turned on. Now you're going to take a funnel and you're going to fill with coolant from there until, you know, it barfs up coolant on you, meaning there's no more air up in that part of the engine. Okay. And then you're going to come over here and you're going to fill this like you know always would, right? You're going to fill it up between the min and the max with the engine cold. And then you're going to run it after you reinstall the ECT. Now what this should do is the ECT is on the block side of the system, right? It's past the thermostat, which is going to be closed, all but closed, when it's cold. It's not going to flow hardly anything at all except for the jiggle valve. So this lets you fill in your big air bubble that's going to develop on the block side of the engine. And then meanwhile, you do your usual fill over here. And so what that's going to do is when things get warm and things come under pressure, instead of a big air bubble forming over there and freaking out your ECU because it thinks that you're in an overheat condition, which kind of temporarily you are, you aren't, it's complicated. But long story short, you're not in a good place. But you minimize the air bubble, basically. Fill on that side, fill on this side, and then you should have little to no air bubble. Normally, this is not a problem, but with this particular job, because we take those hoses off and we really drain out every last ounce of coolant that we can out of the front, it creates a big air bubble that normally you wouldn't get from a drain and fill of your cooling system. So I'm going to edit this in on top of an earlier part of this video because I don't want you to do it the way I did it, which worked, but it was risky. I didn't realize it was going to be that big of an air bubble. So hopefully I didn't damage anything on my 280,000 mile engine that I really need to do stuff in a couple weeks, but I'll probably take it for a drive real quick, find out, make sure everything's behaving as it should. All right, finished up my test drive here, and while cruising at 60 after giving it the beans and being very enthusiastic, I saw nothing higher than 198 degrees Fahrenheit, which is well within normal parameters. And when I was tootling down my road at 20, it was around 192, 194. So we should be good to go. The most of the air pocket should be gone. There's going to be a little bit left, and I'll top it off tomorrow once the engine cools down. But I think I dodged a bullet. Lesson learned there. If the air bubble's too big, you got to be a little bit smarter. In any case, that is a successful repair, and it's going to wrap up this episode in which we replaced the majority of the radiator hoses for my 2001 Ford F-250 5.4 liter named Ms.Mildew. If you found this video interesting, if you found it entertaining, if you learned something, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. That does help to grow the channel and allows me to bring you projects like this. Please also leave a comment. I like to read them, I like to reply to them, and I like to learn from them. And lastly, guys, as this video really points out, I make mistakes on my own junk. I don't know everything, but I do this and I film it so that you guys don't make the same mistakes at home. So, I'll catch you guys next episode.